Any justice-impacted person really has to think from the very beginning about what steps that person can take, or what seeds that person can sow to start getting the outcome that they want. Because the decisions a person makes at the earliest stages of the journey have an influence on opportunities for a higher level of liberty at the soonest possible time. And a lot of people don't understand that at the very beginning of the journey. Now, my name is Michael Santos. I'm the founder of Earning Freedom and all of the Prison Professors coursework. And this is like a ministry to me. I feel super passionate about wanting to help people understand how they can begin building a body of work that will lead to the earliest possible release date for them, the highest level of liberty at the soonest possible time. And this is something that an individual has to do for himself or for herself. They can't depend on a defense attorney. They can't depend on the prison system. They can't depend on anybody else to make that change for them. And one of the things that I always say in any course that we create on Prison Professors is that I would never ask anybody to do anything that I didn't do while going through 26 years in prison. But I don't only want to talk about it, I want to show people that path. And that's the reason this video is going to show some of the relationship between decisions that started very early in the journey, from when I was going in, and learning, as many of you know if you've read Earning Freedom, this book I wrote that kind of documents the entire journey, how once an officer passed me a book about philosophy and I learned about Socrates, it really changed the way that I think. It's what got me to stop thinking about my own problems and to start thinking about the people that I was going to meet in the future and what influence they would have over me. That's what I would like you to be thinking about. Who are the case managers that have discretion over your life? Who are who's going to be presiding over the residential reentry center that's going to assess whether you are qualified to come home early? The more you understand how those processes work, the better you can start to engineer a pathway for your success. So when I started in the journey, the judge had already sentenced me to 45 years in federal prison. And when I got to the penitentiary, I started in a high security penitentiary, case managers told me that I would never leave a penitentiary. So I would never leave a penitentiary until I finished my 45-year sentence, which was going to be after 26 years. Because the sentencing law that existed when I went into the system back in 1987 provided for a person to earn more good time than exists today. But again, I don't want you to be thinking about anything else but you. And in this video that I am creating for you today, I want you to be thinking about what seeds can you sow and how will those seeds relate to your prospects for a higher level of liberty at an earlier time. So when I started, I knew that I would by the time I'd gotten to the penitentiary, I'd already come up with this strategy that said, I need to not think about what I want to do, but I need to think about the people I'm going to meet in the future. Just like anybody watching this video should be thinking about what obstacles do you have to overcome and what can you do today to put you in a better position to overcome those obstacles. One of those, for me, was one tactic in my strategy was I believed I would have to focus on education. I believed that I would have to focus on contributing to society in meaningful, measurable ways. And the other was I believed that I would have to build a stronger support network. And those things all worked in harmony. They all worked together. Some of you may have read Jim Collins's book, Good to Great. And in that book, he talks about what does it take to build a great business. He said it's really hard to get it going, and he used this analogy of this big disc on a pivot. And he said, to get that disc to spin, it takes a lot of energy in the beginning, but once it starts spinning, it takes on a momentum of its own, and that momentum can lead to the outcome that somebody wants. So I want you to be thinking about what energy can you deploy today to build something better for tomorrow. Now, for me, it was first I have to get university degrees, and that I described the strategies that I used to pursue that path of writing to universities, explaining that I didn't have any money, describing the bad decisions that I made that put me in prison, but then expressing what do I want to do different with my life. And eventually, I persuaded a university to admit me, even though I'd been a terrible student in high school, and that's kind of what started the path. But once I got into school, I continued this pursuit of wanting to do what? Build a support network. So use that same strategy of writing to influential people, trying to get them to become a part of my community, and then, of course, contributing to society. And I did that through published writings. And that journey is really what carried me through the first several years of my prison sentence, to where I earned an undergraduate degree and I earned a master's degree. And later I had to really shift my focus, and that focus became on publishing, because I believe once the warden blocked me from getting a PhD, I had to say, well, I know that I want to devote my life to improving outcomes for all people in the criminal justice system. And that means I have to learn how to become a better advocate. And I did that through publishing. And so some of you may see some of the books that I published, starting with About Prison, published by Wadsworth Thompson Publishers. And then Greenwood Prager Publishers brought the second book to market, which was called Profiles from Prison, where I interviewed other people in prison and got their story about what was their journey like. And then, wanting to reach a broader audience, I found a book in the library called Writer's Market. I learned how to get a literary agent, and I started writing, and that's what led to Inside: Life Behind Bars in America, which had a wide audience. It led to publications in the New York Times and the Los Angeles Times, and built my body of support. It was through all of that work that Carol came into my life, and I found the love of my life while I was in prison, and nurtured a relationship and got married inside of a prison. But all of that, when I got out, and I got out in August of 2013, I continued this pathway of saying, okay, now I'm home, but I left a lot of people in prison that I want to change. And so I want to talk a little bit about how those decisions in prison put me in a position to become an advocate. And you could see this by looking at some of my mentors, whether it's Norval Morris at the University of Chicago, or John DiUlio from Princeton University, or Joan Petersilia, who was at she was originally, when I started corresponding with her, she was at Harvard, then UC Irvine, then she went to Stanford. But I was probably in my 24th, 23rd year of prison. I think it was like 2009 or so. She wrote a letter inviting me to publish an article for a new book she was writing called The Oxford Handbook of Sentencing and Corrections. And this is not a book that people that are not practitioners of the criminal justice system would read, but it would be one that influenced legislators and policymakers. And so to receive that invitation to publish in her book while I was still in prison, I believed was an opportunity for me. And that opportunity I really seized by writing a chapter for her, and that chapter she published in her book. But once I wrote the chapter, which was rather substantial chapter, as I recall, it was about 10,000 words, I realized, well, I might as well turn this into an entire book. And that's what became Earning Freedom: Life Behind Bars in America. And it's very important that you think about that title, Earning Freedom, because the whole concept of earning freedom that I started to write about in the 1999 to 2010 era, I was writing about we need mechanisms and programs that would allow people to work toward earning freedom in incremental stages. In other words, reward or incentivize people for the behavior that they made while they were in prison. And you could read it for yourself. You could look at the copyright date and say that I published it, but it didn't stop there. Because I wrote all of those books while I was in prison, San Francisco State opened opportunities for me to come and be a professor at a major university. Invitations came from Stanford and NYU and Berkeley and all of these other universities where I got to come and speak. And what am I doing when I'm speaking? I'm advocating and saying we need to change the prison system so that we're not measuring justice through the turning of calendar pages, but rather incentivizing a pursuit of excellence. See, that's what makes America great, is that we incentivize people to pursue excellence. Out here in society, a person who is gifted, a person who works hard, a person who builds a pathway to succeed reaches a higher level than somebody that doesn't. And I think that prisons should be the same way. People that go to prison should work hard, but if they work hard, the system should open mechanisms that reward them and incentivize others. And so I have to spread that message because there's a lot of people that didn't believe that. They certainly didn't believe that when I was in prison. So I kept working, and that led to an invitation to speak at a judicial conference in San Francisco, and that opened an opportunity for me to publish in a peer-reviewed law journal or law review, which is the UC Hastings Law Review. And you can see it there on the screen. These aren't my words. This is what advocacy is about. And what is the title of that? It's about incentivizing excellence, right? It's about earned time credits, which you see in the First Step Act. I've been speaking about that for years. That's what advocacy is. It's a long path. And all of this, of course, happened years before the First Step Act passed. And then we could advance further and go to this Rabina Institute at the University of Minnesota Law School. Because of all that work earlier, University of Minnesota Law School invited me to come and participate on a panel. And you could see it. Don't take my word for it. Look at this, the PDF that we're showing you right here, and look at the distinguished people that are on the Rabina Institute's panel. It includes leading scholars from around the country. It includes the highest level CEOs of sentencing or parole or commutation boards. It even includes the chairwoman, I think that's what it's called, the chairwoman of the United States Parole Commission, Patricia Smoot. But look who else is there. Michael Santos from Earning Freedom. And what am I doing there? I am your voice, the voice of the justice-impacted person, really advocating and saying, this is why we need to change the system. This is why we need to reintroduce the U.S. Parole Commission. And that's what really my advocacy is all about. But the reason I bring this up is I want you to recognize that advocacy is never an overnight fix. It's many years in the making. And I would never ask anybody to do anything I didn't do. I just want you to know that if you're going into the justice system, don't just defer all wisdom and judgment to your lawyer. Make sure that you are pursuing a self-advocacy path, because that's the pattern that opened higher levels of liberty and better opportunities once I got out of prison. And I want you to be thinking not only about the challenges and struggle you feel about having to go into the prison system, or perhaps the challenges and struggles that you feel because you're in the prison system. I want you to think about best possible outcomes. And I want you to work as if you are the CEO of your own life. And the way you do that is you begin by thinking about, how am I going to define success? You're not going to define success the same way that I define success. I know that, and I get that, and that's okay. But you have to define it for yourself. For me, it was always saying, I am going to serve this sentence. I'm going to come back to society, and nobody's going to know I served a day in prison unless I tell them. But I'm a big believer in this prison ministry that I run with my wife of trying to open advocacy efforts for all. But that's a heavy lift, just like it was a heavy lift while I was going through 26 years in prison. First, I had to get an education. Then I had to publish. Then I had to build a support network. And because of that, San Francisco State University invited me to become a professor. And because of that, opportunities for speaking engagements opened around the country. And because of that, I could build these programs that I bring into prisons with the idea that they will become productive activities that people can use and learn from to advance their release date. And we've been doing this in every state prison in California, several federal prisons, starting with the United States Penitentiary in Atwater, followed by the ADX and the United States Penitentiaries in Florence, followed by the prisons in Victorville, followed by the prisons in Greenville, Illinois, and then what was next? Terre Haute, Indiana, and then the medical center in Rochester, Minnesota, and then what was next? Oxford, Wisconsin, and now what's coming next? Springfield, Missouri, and then Marion, Illinois, and then what's next? Milan, Michigan, and Waseca, Minnesota. And that's what's off the top of my head right now where I am going next. But what I am saying is that all of that advocacy work is what led to these changes, which was that influences big change like the First Step Act, which influences every person in federal prison. But my work isn't over. I still have to work to try and persuade legislators and citizens on why we need to reinstate the United States Parole Commission, why we need to expand the use of sentence commutations to incentivize excellence. That's the strategy that I am always striving toward, and it's what I'm asking you to do and join me on. In order for me to become successful, I've got to bring our programs into more jails and prisons, and then I have to collect data so that I can show people who work through the prison professors' initiatives are less likely to recidivate and more likely to emerge with their dignity intact and opportunities to thrive. So if you have the Preparing for Success After Prison course in your prison, I urge you to go through the course, get the milestone credits or the earn time credits to advance your release date, but more importantly, understand that I need your help. In order, if you want the U.S. Parole Commission to be back, be the change you want to see in the world. Help by showing more participation in productive programs, no disciplinary infractions, participation in the financial responsibility program, and really just this proactive effort to make sure that you're building a pathway to success. That's the strategy that worked for me. My name is Michael Santos. I'm the founder of Prison Professors. I would never ask anyone to do anything that I didn't do. But I'm showing you here how that strategy worked for me, and I believe it can work for you as well. I believe in you. So please stick with the Prison Professors program and work towards the best possible outcome, the highest level of liberty at the soonest possible time. I believe in you.